All right, I pressed go live. All right, we should be going. All right, I'm going to push this on Twitter real quick. There we go. Boom. The Magic Mike Show, what we learned. This is awesome. Cool. It doesn't show if anybody's watching, so we can just jump into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. 3, 2. What's up, everybody? I'm Magic.
And I'm Mike.
And this is the Magic Mike Show 181. This is a special live stream. Our first time trying this, Mike. Mr. Samich, how are you today?
Doing good, man. What could go wrong, right? Technology always never fails, right? So I'm sure this will go great. No, I'm excited. This is cool. We're hopefully we get some questions randomly during the show, and I think we're going to try and do this a little bit more often. So hopefully people can kind of see how the sausage is made here and see our zero outtake podcast that we do.
Yeah, exactly. This is well, you brought it up a couple of weeks ago because I forget what we were talking about, but you said something towards the end of the show that just made me throw up my hands and kind of walk away. And because I have this setup for that reason, because I'm a hands talker and I move a lot, that you said like, oh, if only people could see what was happening to Magic during these podcasts that we record because he's losing his mind. Well, now you can. Now you can. And I'm really happy that this is the episode that we are debuting this live stream format. You can watch us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, Periscope. The replays will be up there. The reason I love that we're doing this for this episode, Mike, is because it is officially the 2-year anniversary of our very first episode of the Magic Mike Show, which is when we recap the Ohio Derby. And I honestly don't know which Ohio Derby was better, that one or the one that we just saw with Dean Martini winning.
Who won that one?
It was not Lone Sailor. It was Core Beliefs. Core Beliefs beat Lone Sailor. And that was when we started making fun of him for being a hanger. And also how fortuitous.
Yeah.
How fortuitous is the timing? Lone Sailor, they announced officially is retired. So
there we go.
I was like, this is just everything is just coming up Millhouse for us making our debut here. So this is exciting. We've got a, other than the Ohio Derby, we do have a lot of great races to talk about. We saw 2 Breeders' Cup races, 2 Breeders' Cup prep races gave out berths to their respective leaders of the divisions. We also had a former Breeders' Cup champion who finally looks like she's regained her form. So it'll be exciting. We got a lot to talk about. Like Mike said, if you're watching this live, you got any comments, just shoot them in there. It doesn't matter what platform you're watching on. We'll see them. And if we can, we'll reply to them. But before we do it, Mike, what's the best thing you saw this weekend?
I'm excited about this weekend of racing again. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but when you actually see the stakes races that we're going to have going here, it's pretty incredible. I mean, next weekend, it's just going to be awesome to be able to see the Belmont stakes card that's already starting to build up. I mean, for a while there, it was just like, okay, we got to get excited about this one track or these one races. And it's nice to see when it's nice and daunting at the same time. When you log on to DRF and you go down, you scroll through all the side, it's just track after track after track after track. And for a while there, it was like, 2 tracks, 3 tracks, right? And so it's nice to be back in the full swing. So being able to go on DRF and see all these tracks running, and then on top of that, having the Stars and Stripes Festival, which is awesome for 2 reasons. I mean, first off, you got the great racing. Secondly, Saratoga's about to open up. I mean, it's right around the corner at this point because this is the last. I'm pumped about that. It's the last big day. We get Saratoga, we get Del Mar going. So I'm pretty excited about that. I will also be excited when Los Alamitos closes. I cannot hit a ticket at Los Alamitos when the thoroughbreds go there. So it'll be great when they actually close that puppy up, so we can go down to Del Mar. What about you? What's the best thing you saw this weekend?
Best thing that I saw, and it'll show up in the podcast version. We haven't quite figured out how to splice in the audio for these live ones yet. But the race before the Ohio Derby, I wrote this down to make sure I got it right. It was the Cleveland Gold Cup Stakes at Thistledown. It's $75,000. It was the same distance at Thistledown on the dirt.
By the way,
you're mad about this one?
Yeah, go ahead. Now I'll tell why I'm mad about it.
So the reason I want to talk about it is because the horse that won at 23-1 is Chief Randall. He's owned and bred by Harry Waite, who is the father of Wise Dan in the Fantasy League. And so it's great when you can – I always think it's great when there's a homebred horse that wins a stakes race because as a breeder, you've been there literally from day one with that horse. And so Chief Randall at 23-1 beats a field of 3-year-olds. He did really well. There was a heavy 2-5 favorite that a lot of people were singling in their sequences, but Chief Randall was able to knock off. So I'm going to throw in the podcast version, I'm going to throw the audio in. So if you're listening later, you can hear it. But just so cool that a homebred horse, but someone who, we know really well, his dad, puts this horse through and gets the win. Dan said that they're thinking maybe West Virginia Derby for him after that. But it's just really cool. And it was a great performance from a day of racing at Thistledown that probably a lot of people, yourself included, probably want to forget. So tell me why you're mad at Dan's dad's horse beating you.
He couldn't tell anybody about this. I mean, come on. He's in the fantasy league. His dad breeds a horse, and he can't tell his boys, hey, if you're in a tournament and perhaps that race is in it, maybe play the 23-1 shot that I know is going to run well. That would have been nice. But no, I'm happy for him. That's really cool. I mean, the homebred style, I cannot imagine going from breeding a horse to actually seeing the horse give birth to seeing on the racetrack to eventually winning a stakes. Like I understand throwing a couple bucks at a horse and being super excited when they get into the winner's circle. I can't imagine like this length of passion that you have for the horse and how long you really put the blood, sweat, and tears into it to then actually see them get to the winner's circle. Has to be awesome. So Dan and Dan's dad, congratulations. P.S. Next time, drop a text.
Well, to be fair, Dan did text Aaron and I daily about Chief Randall for about a week.
Now I can be mad at you too.
But also, to be fair, Dan texts us a lot about horses.
That's true too.
So I was playing the odds game here, and I'm just kidding. Honestly, it's really great. I love seeing that. Dan, trust me, is kicking himself because Dan didn't bet it. So if it makes you feel better, Dan didn't even bet the horse. And 23-1 is a really great shot. So anyways, on today's show, we're going to be talking about the big races from Churchill Downs and from Belmont Park. Like we said earlier, if you're watching this live, shoot us some comments. We'll try and answer some questions along the way as we can. You ready, Mike?
Let's do it.
Riders up. All right, kicking things off for this recap show, Mike, we're going to go to Churchill Downs. Starting with race 10, this was the biggest race on the card at Churchill Downs, a grade 2 $500,000 Stephen Foster Stakes. You got a field of 8 males going a mile and an eighth on the main track. This is a Breeders' Cup winner for the Longines Classic. Heavy favoritism is on Tom's D'Etat. He was even money for a long time there. By my standards, crept up a little bit in the betting, but he definitely couldn't creep up on him in the stretch because Tom's D'Etat, not only did he win by 4 1/4 lengths, not only did he win without trying, he was that close to breaking the track record, Mike, 0.02 seconds off of breaking the track record at Churchill Downs in the Stephen Foster. Miguel Mena, best part was Miguel Mena just crossing Joel Rosario. Nope, don't need him. I got this. It was great. I loved every second of it. I'm just mad that I didn't single him when we did our ticket. What did you think about Tom?
I mean, he was ultra impressive. I thought that this might be a spot where you'd see a little bit of weaker effort, but he ran absolutely huge. The obviously Rosario not being on him didn't matter one iota. 109 buyer, which is the top buyer for the career. This is just an amazing story. A 7-year-old seems to keep getting better somehow. And at some point you thought you kind of saw the top level, but this was by far the most impressive race I've seen him run in his career at this point. Who knows where Tom's D'Etat can go from here? I mean, we end up covering him. He's in all these big races. I'm actually getting his name right now. So
I know it's just I'm like a proud parent. I'm like Harry Wade after Chief Randall won the stakes. I'm like, oh, yeah. He's doing it. He's fine.
When I figure out which sex all the horses are, then you can be the proud parent because I still mess that up. And by my standards, didn't run a bad race here. I mean, he tied his career best buyer in a 102. He ran well behind him. Tom's D'Etat just was a tour de force in this spot. You mentioned not singling him. I don't mind not singling him here. I thought that he was overbet at even money, or I paid $460. That's actually not that bad, but I still thought he was overbet at that spot. And against this field, I thought there were a couple horses that could beat him. And I was wrong. Tom's D'Etat came with the A game and definitely showed up and won convincingly and easily. So it's now just kind of on to the next and seeing what happens with the 7-year-old. I mean, he's clearly the division leader right now. So it'll be interesting to see what he does down the line. But you can't really say anything negative about Tom's D'Etat. And I don't think you could really knock By My Standards or Silver Dust in this spot. They both ran good races behind him. I was a little disappointed in Fearless. I would like to see him run a little bit better. But, I think that the top two were clearly the two best in the race and the two that you want to kind of keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, you bring up Fearless, and that was a horse that we were talking during the show, when we previewed the sequence, I said, if I was going to go deeper here, Fearless is who I would look at. I know you really liked him too. He's got a late running style, but if you take out the 2 times he's tried greatest stakes races, he's got 3 wins and a really nice second against a horse that was drugged out of his mind and should have never beaten him. So really, he's perfect from 3 starts. And these 2 grade 2 starts, though, it's a little concerning because he really just hasn't shown up. And I don't know if maybe just the pace wasn't there for him or what. You also talked about By My Standards, a 102 buyer, and you get second. I mean, what could he have done? It was a record, basically a record-setting performance that beat him. Like, if I'm playing By My Standards next time out, I'd nothing you could have done in this race.
Yeah, I don't think you take anything away from By My Standards at all. I mean, that's the thing. I think he just got beat by a better horse in this spot. And the question is as a 4-year-old, can he improve versus Tom's D'Etat possibly taking a step back later in a 7-year-old season? And we've seen no reason to believe that Tom's is going to get any weaker. By My Standards obviously has every right to continue to improve. As for Fearless, I mean, this is a 4-year-old who's lightly raced. It's only his 6th start of his career. He was a favorite, a $180 favorite against By My Standards 3 back in the Grade 2 New Orleans. So there's clearly a ton of talent. It's just kind of figuring out how to do this and just being way too far back right now is kind of the problem. Even if you look at the first 2 races he ran, a 6 furlong breaking his maiden, he runs a 79 buyer and he's on the lead on a 23-second opening quarter. Goes a mile and 16th next time out. He's on the lead in a 23.3 opening second quarter, 23 3/5 opening second quarter. So it's not like the guy doesn't have speed. It's just it kind of disappears. I mean, even if you look at the optional 62 to the 1, opening quarter in 24 3/5, and he's 8 lengths back. It just doesn't make a ton of sense why he's not showing that same earlier speed. And it's not like they switch blinkers or anything like that. So I think they got to figure out how to make sure he gets out of the gate well and is able to really kind of get involved in the race a little bit earlier.
Yeah, he just didn't come through for us. I didn't watch Churchill that much. I focused on the stakes races. There was so much that was happening. Did you watch Churchill enough to notice if there was a bias against anybody trying to come from the back like Fearless was trying in this position here? Because Tom's was so perfectly positioned right off of the early lead that looking back, I'm like, was there just a little bit of a track bias that day?
Yeah, I didn't watch much of Churchill, to be honest with you. I mean, the tournaments mainly focused on Stronach tracks and a couple others, so that was where my main tournament focus was. And then I was all in on Belmont because that's where the Sama Bombs were. So I was watching a lot of Belmont, some Gulfstream, some Losal, unfortunately, and so I didn't have as much time to focus on Churchill either. It was mainly the stakes races for me, and obviously the last race too, which played a role in the pick 4, and then I think the cross country pick 5 too.
We'll move back one race prior. The Fleur de Lis, this is a Grade 2 $200,000 stakes. Actually, it used to be a handicap. They changed it this year. It's now a stakes. This is a Breeders' Cup winner for the Longines Distaff. This was if anybody was hyped for a race, I think this is the one because you got Midnight Bisou returning since she faced the boys in the Saudi Cup. Almost got the victory. That was back in late February. So you were questioning, how is she going to be off the layoff? How is she going to be traveling back to the United States? Because she's never shipped like that before. You got Serengeti Empress, who's clearly going to be the pace setter. If she can get a loose lead, which she did here, it's going to be really hard to catch her. And yet Midnight Bisou, 8 1/4 lengths. And before Tom's d'Etat's race, it was looking like Midnight Bisou should go off to the boys and face it. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want your thoughts on the Fleur de Lis and Midnight Bisou.
Yeah, I mean, she was. It's tough to say on a day where you had. I mean, which was more impressive? It's impossible to even say which one was in the races, which is crazy to think because both were just insanely impressive. On any day, almost anywhere else, one or the other is the standout. In this case, you had them both. I think the fractions actually were a little hot. I mean, we had a 109-4 opening 6 furlongs, which is pretty fast, especially when you don't get a breather. I mean, at no time did we get a 24-second quarter in here, which I think really hurt Serengeti Empress up front. But I don't think it mattered. I mean, Midnight Bisou was winning this race. She was a freight train around the turn. I mean, you watch the replay, and Smith kind of gives her a little love tap midway through the turn, and she just starts. She's making that Arazi, that beholder move that you don't see all that often, right past horses, and never really asked until the final 16th, or final quarter of a mile, where he tapped her once and then turned her off. I mean, she was dominant in the return performance. I think it's interesting that people are saying, run her against the boys. We'll see. I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to do that. I thought someone mentioned she's 0 for 2 at the Breeders' Cup against the girls, so maybe it's not quite time yet to flip over. But I can also see why people would want to compete in the classic division. Really, without Tom's d'Etat, I mean, there's no horse that I would necessarily take over Bisou right now in that division. So it was an impressive performance, especially coming back. So it'll be interesting to see what she does and where she goes from here.
We have, let me do the math. We have just a little over basically 4 months to figure out if you want to race a girl against the boys in the classic. And I think in the next 4 months, you're going to see, is Mucho Gusto going to return? How's Improbable going to look? Because now we've seen it was a pretty crappy field that he beat, but he did win it a mile and a quarter. So he did pass that test. By my standards, Tom's d'Etat, Maximum Security. You don't know what's going to happen with him from Bob Baffert, but you got that working on. So it's really still, I think, a really murky picture for the boys in the classic, really in any division, but especially for the classic, because you have so many unknowns. It's kind of like Chad Brown with his turf stars. Like Chad Brown's winning turf graded stakes races, and he hasn't even brought his Ferrari out of the garage yet. Like let's just wait a second on that one. She is over. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you also have no idea what the 3-year-olds are going to do. Because so many of these Triple Crown 3-year-olds, and I think Honor AP, I think Tiz the Law would both be interesting horses in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and we have no clue what type of shape they'll be in. Are they going to skip the Preakness? What's the lead up to it? I think it's going to be awfully interesting to see what the 3-year-olds do later in this year, because I think they are also they seem to be developing into very good horses as we go through this process.
I forgot Code of Honor too. I'm really mad at myself for forgetting that because I thought he's going to be. I know we talked about him before. He's going to be a force. I did want to ask you one quick question. What did you think about Midnight Bisu's trainer winning the title at Churchill Downs?
I said it on our text chain. I'll say it here. Oakland and Churchill Downs, he's great. Everywhere else, he's overbet. And just to hammer the point home, he's a 15% trainer in Florida, California, and New York. But he gets bet like he's 25% because he's 30% in a lot of the smaller tracks like Lone Star and Will Rogers. He crushes lower level competition. But when he has to go and face grade ones in Saratoga and go out west and go down to Florida, he gets beat. It's just that simple. Last year, he won one grade one, not with a horse not named Midnight Bisu or Matoli in those 3 states. And that was a race where he had 3 of the 6 entries. 3 of the 6. I mean, look, I'm not saying he's a bad trainer. I'm just simply saying he gets way overbet when he leaves Churchill and Oakland.
I couldn't help it. I really appreciate Darren posting that comment.
There are certain hills I'm willing to die on. That is one of them. I don't want. It sounds like I'm bashing him. He's the worst 20% trainer out there. That's the thing. Like, and he gets bet like he's Brown and Pletcher even when he's at Saratoga. And that to me is just overdoing it because I would much rather take Brown or Pletcher 2-year-olds or graded stakes horses versus the Asmussen barn that is unless it's his top tier horses, because he does have some like generationally good horses. Mm-hmm. You do have to separate the wheat from the shaft there, but the rest of them, you can have them.
We'll move over to Belmont Park. The biggest race of the day on Saturday, June 27th, is race 10. This is the grade 1, $250,000 just a game stakes. Field of 6 fillies and mares going a mile on the outer turf course. It was going to be 7. Got Stormy actually scratched. She's actually going to be re-entered, it looks like, in a stakes race this coming weekend against the boys at Belmont Park. But they definitely like a very firm turf for her, and she wasn't getting that. Even though it officially was listed as firm, there definitely was some cut in the grass because of the rain that we got at Belmont Park. A newspaper of record, finally on a non-yielding track, gets a win. She was the obvious pace on paper, right? We knew this. There was no surprise there. With a 6-horse field, nobody went with her. I don't know if that would have mattered much. She wins by 3 lengths. Irad really never seemed to take her out of second gear. I was impressed. I'd been a believer if she was yielding in a play against if it wasn't yielding, and she might have changed my mind here. What did you think?
Well, first off, let's talk about the track condition. It was listed as fast or firm. It was not. I mean, it was definitely playing slower than it had been the previous 2 days or previous week and 2 weeks, if you want to go back that far. I mean, you had horses running 25-second opening quarters who seemed to be struggling going down the lane. And that is just the opposite of what we had seen from that track. If you were up front, you were in a very good spot generally. And in this track, it was not necessarily playing that same way. And it was definitely playing slower quarters, both early and late. That being said, man, she ran her heart out here. If you look at the internal fractions, 23 and 4, 48 and 1, 112 and 1, she comes home in 135 and 3. So she did the last quarter of a mile in sub 12 second furlongs, which is very, very good considering that she kind of got those middle breathers there. I thought this was a heck of an effort from newspaper record. I think the 1 turn probably helped her versus 2 turns. I also don't think that the biggest threat in this race showed up. I mean, this was a subpar effort from Uni and not what we've really come to expect from her. So moving forward, I mean, look, I don't want to take anything away from newspaper of record because I think she ran a heck of a race. I don't think all the questions are answered on her. I'm not willing to play her at a very short price in single race wagers moving forward on a firm turf still. I would love for her to face Uni again at a mile going 2 turns so I can bet Uni. But I'm not sure, for me, it definitely kind of gave her gave me a little more confidence her moving forward, but I'm not sure how far I'm willing to go quite just off this effort right now.
And then you brought up Uni. They were both $1.05 favorite. Uni's got the little star indicating she was favorite. They were both about the same. I was pretty disappointed with Uni. She's not had problems returning off of a layoff before, so I was a little concerned with this spot. She did run the best race of her life to win the Breeders' Cup Mile over the boys and over Got Stormy last year. I was a little surprised, honestly, they brought her back, but it's also the first race. We'll give it one more, I think, for her, before we want to fully close the door on her. This is really reminding me of 2018 when Chad Brown had Sister Charlie in her first big year of the States. He had a Raving Beauty, who was that speedster that would somehow almost always seem to hold on, even when she shouldn't. And he had 4-Star Crook, who really, in anyone else's barn, is going to be your A player. But I think that's what we're seeing here with Chad Brown, because you've got newspaper of record, Uni, if she returns to form, you've got Rushing Fall, and oh yeah, by the way, Sister Charlie is still waiting for the Diana to come back in another month here. So it's just crazy the bountiful riches that he has on the turf here. We haven't seen Sister Charlie, we haven't seen Uni's best. Who is your clubhouse leader in the Chad Brown barn right now?
I mean, it's Sister Charlie until further notice, right? I mean, you can't really say that she's not the best horse in that barn until you see her regress in some way, because she's been such a monster for 2 straight years that you just got to keep giving her the love. And I even think you got to keep an eye on Regal Glory here, who is a 4-year-old out of the Chad Brown barn too, that did very good things last year at Saratoga, and started facing older for the first 2 times, and in both cases faced newspaper of record and ran well last time out, first time off the long layoff, last time against her, and faced her again here and ran a respectable 4th with Uni and Beau Recall beating her. So I think that's another horse that I wouldn't be shocked if at some point Regal Glory gets a massive weight advantage and pops up and wins one of these races too. I mean, right now, newspaper record is carrying the low weight. That's going to change as she continues to win great stakes. So her weight's going to go up, theirs is going to go down, and it's going to create some interesting results because of that.
We'll go one race prior to the True North Stakes, which is race 10. This is grade 2, $150,000 purse. A field of males, 6 males going 6.5 furlongs on the main track. The reason I want to bring it up is because Firenze Fire gets the win, and this is the first high-profile former Jason Service or Rory Navarro trainee, in this case Service, that comes back to win. And he lost his first race. That was the Carter. Yeah, 4th, but his new trainer, Kelly Breen, said that, we think he just needed the race, just get back into the action. And he shows up with a big effort. It's not the Firenze Fire that we used to see where it was just absolutely dominating. He did win impressively. This wasn't a great field, but he did win well enough that if he takes one more leap forward, we could see him get back to the Firenze Fire of old. How do you, as a handicapper and a bettor, Mike, take this information about, okay, so he's been away from service for over 3 months now, 3.5 months. Have the drugs worked out of his system? Can we see this is actually what his talent level is? What do you do here?
Well, I mean, this is an interesting one. It was second off a layoff, which is probably a +2. So he's had a race out of him. So he's kind of gotten that first one out. We have seen both the Navarro and the Service horses really struggle in their trips back. Like you said, it has been 3 months now. You should see some of them coming to certain forms. I don't know. Maybe we will have some that come back better. I mean, you don't totally know what the result of this is going to be. The Firenze Fire ran a really good race here. He ran a 97, which is a solid buyer. He loves Belmont Park, loves the setup. I thought he made sense. I used him defensively in most tickets. I didn't really want to throw him on top because I still was not confident before this race. I think it was almost more meaningful that yesterday at the Belmont 5th race, a horse came back and ran for the first time off a layoff and was able to win out of the, I think it was the Service barn. So when you start to see this happen more and more, you have to start fading off the angle. I mean, we've talked about this constantly. I've been throwing out every single Service and Navarro horse first time out. I'm not going to do that wholeheartedly anymore. I'm now going to give them kind of a second look. I think it's been long enough that, for lack of a better term, they could go through rehab and get back on the track and get back to what the form that they should be in, or the fit level they should be in to be able to compete. So I am going to give a second look now to Service and Navarro horses first off. I will still be looking for second off over first off, but I do think you cannot just throw them out now, which is what I've been doing. Although I think you still can do that with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile from last year.
Oh my goodness, that's a good segue. Let's go talk about that. The Ohio Derby on Saturday at Thistledown. This is grade 3, $500,000 purse. I'll hand it to them because I think of every race that we saw this weekend from a purely betting perspective, this was probably the best one if you were able to nail it, because I was against Storm the Court. You were against Storm the Court. I think the guys on Blinkers Off, they were saying he's a defensive use at best, but you can't trust him on top. I know Aaron didn't pick him on top. A lot of juice, actually, I shouldn't use that word, sorry. A lot of betting steam went to Sprawl, who was 15-1 on the morning line, which when I handicapped this, I looked at that and that's odd. 15-1, this seems a little bit odd. He goes all the way down to 3-1. Doesn't get the job done. That goes to Dean Martini. This was a weird race. There's a lot to kind of dissect and talk about if we want to. I think before we get into it, if you didn't know, Dean Martini is not Triple Crown nominated. Tom Amos has already said he's not going to push him for the Kentucky Derby. So your defending Breeders' Cup Juvenile champion, your Eclipse Award-winning 2-year-old, can't even beat Dean Martini in this race, who's not even going to the Kentucky Derby. That being said, Mike, what did you think about Dean Martini and his performance?
Somewhere Dean Martini's like, what do I got to do, man? A little respect. Come on. I thought we were done really well. I thought that if we were still doing the what was it, the ride of the week? What was the name of it?
Oh, the
Yeah, I
crafty
know.
ride of the week.
There it is for
Oh,
craft.
that's
Yeah,
an old school.
that was that was early. It would go to DeMartini's jockey here.
Yes.
I mean, he just did a great job of not only pushing the button a little earlier than he probably should have, but as soon as the rail opened up, he pushed the button at the top of the turn, spurted right through, was able to kind of create separation before everyone else was really realized what was happening, and was able to push the button on their horses. And he had a 3-4 length lead at the top of the stretch that was just very hard to overcome. And that's how he got the job done here. Everyone else was going wide. He was able to get the rail. This is one of those things. A lot of times people ask me, do you really care about post position? This is one of the reasons I care about post position. I mean, the one horse got the rail, was able to hold the rail the whole way through. And when it opened up, since he was stalking right behind the leader, he was able to just go. And I think that a big difference in his trip versus South Bend's trip versus Storm the Court's trip, even a horse he had travel less distance, and he was able to make the first move because of where he was sitting, and that was because of his one post position versus being hung on the outside. It's funny you mentioned Sprawl at 15-1. That wasn't even the worst morning line that was on here. Established, the 12 horse was 30-1. Who, I mean, you look at that and you're like, what? How is that horse 30? It's like, ran a 92 buyer at Churchill. Yeah, it's a maiden, but it just got nosed out by per capita in that race. So there was a couple head scratcher morning lines in here, and I think the cream rose to the top, to be honest with you. I mean, DeMartini was a little bit of a surprise. I used him in the cross country pick 5, and it was one that I used in tournaments, but it wasn't one that I thought you could really lean on. I thought Sprawl was probably Sprawl, South Bend, and Established were the 3 that I was most interested in coming into it. But I thought that the one due to the post and the improvement was definitely playable too. Man, South Bend looked good though. For the first time back on dirt, I thought this was a pretty good improvement, or a pretty good effort from the 10 as well.
Yeah, I didn't hate him when he was on dirt. I never thought he was of the elite class. And so when they went and tried turf, okay, that makes sense. Like, we're going to see where they're going to experiment and see where they can get him to stick. He ran well. I think that I would have been much less surprised if he won than if Storm the Court won, because I don't know what you even do with that horse at this point. One quick thing about DeMartini, they paid $50,000 for him. They claimed him out of the Brad Cox barn when he was purchased for $220,000 by Rockingham Ranch. Peter Miller couldn't get him to win. He tried dirt, he tried turf, couldn't do it. They sent him to Brad Cox. Rockingham Ranch backs out of the ownership. David Bernson, who's Rockingham's partner, just said, whatever, just get rid of him for $50,000. They just cashed a $300,000 check for winning the Ohio Derby. Like, that's a pretty good ROI in his second start off the claim. Like, if we could all be so lucky in the claiming game to do that.
Yeah, that's not so bad, right? I mean, it pays for the $220,000 purchase price, like you mentioned, right there in that one race. It's interesting too, because they didn't try him long, and this horse seems to have gotten better since he went mile and a 16th, mile and 16th, mile and an eighth, mile and an eighth, improved every time, and definitely like the mile and eighth distance again here. I think that, and we talked about this a little before we hit the live button here, I think you're going to see some big but weaker fields in these derbies because of how everything else is set up. I think that you're going to, you have all these massive points races coming up, be it the Haskell, be it the Keeneland, the Bluegrass, be it the Travers. July and early August are absolutely packed with these big races. I think you're going to not see any, like before you'd see like the third tier Bafferts and things like that in these races. I think you're going to see some interesting winners come out of these, the Ohio Derby, the West Virginia Derby. I think that you're going to see some unique results. And this kind of backs that theory up that, we're not going to get that top tier 3-year-olds in these spots. And because of that, I think you're going to have some big fields and some nice prices, and they're going to be great betting races and great betting sequences.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Magic Mike Show. Thank you so much, everybody who joined on the live stream that we were doing. We have one quick question I want to throw up here. I'm going to throw it to Darren because he had that Steve Asmussen comment earlier. It just made me chuckle. Darren wants to know, how do you guys deal with horses that have been getting creamed in the allowance ranks, dropping to claiming, and what do you look for when the form has been so bad in those allowance races to project that they'll do better in the claiming ranks?
I mean, for me, the first thing is speed. When you show speed versus better and then drop down, that is something I'm always looking for, because I look, if you're on the lead, you're not going to get a bad trip. You got the trip you wanted at that point, so you can't run into trouble if you're trying to close. And I've talked about this before, and mostly on Twitter, but there's mentality in horses where if a horse, how do I put this best? Look, if I'm playing basketball against an NBA player to 10, I'll know two points in that I'm going to lose, right? If I'm playing against, and my effort level will go down. If I'm playing against someone who, let's say played in high school, it's a little better game. If I play against someone who, just messes around every now and then, it's going to be a real competitive game, and my juices are going to get flowing. I'm going to perform better the more closer to my skill level I face, right? So if I'm way over my head and I'm just getting beat down, I'm gonna not play well, not try as hard. It just makes sense to kind of see a lower effort. And it's the same with horses. When they get to their correct class, you can expect to see their best effort because they're engaged in the race. You know, if you have horses that are facing 22 and a fifth opening quarters, and then they're facing 23 and a fifth opening quarters, they're going to be more engaged because they're going to be closer up. They'll be closer to the leaders. They'll know that they have a chance. And so what I'm looking for mainly when you're dropping down is someone who's speed and faded, or sometimes a middle move and then kind of flattened out down the lane, whereas against better horses, that move would have put them in front, and flattening out would have been then just holding their lead. I also will look at what the barn is and try and figure out why they're dropping. If it's a horse that's kind of gotten through most of the conditions and they're in a non-winners of two allowances, and then they're dropping down to 50,000 claiming, that's really not that big of a drop for me. And so I'm thinking that they want to try and still place the horse where it can win, but don't want to give it away. That's a more playable horse in my mind. If you see the non-winners of one allowance, 88,000 down to 10,000 claiming, that's just a red flag in my mind for a horse they just want to get rid of. And then the question is why? I mean, there are better spots that they can put this horse in from an ownership group perspective. So I want to see not overly aggressive drops or track drops. I mean, that's the other thing. I think that people don't talk about tracks enough when you're talking about class. If you're dropping from an allowance at one place to a claiming at another, and the allowance is, I don't know, Belmont, Del Mar, Saratoga, Keeneland, Churchill Downs.
And you drop to Finger Lakes.
Yeah, then it's like, okay, now you have a huge advantage. So what did you show there? But then also that kind of raises the question mark too. So it depends on where the horse is going to. I don't think people talk enough about that specific move. I actually think the other way around too is interesting. When you see a horse going from claiming at Saratoga to an allowance at Finger Lakes, that is a horse I want to use because I believe they think that they found an easier spot or softer spot. So when you're going up in class but down in track level, then that horse is awfully interesting to me.
You pretty much stole all the things I was going to say in response to Darren. I will say my biggest thing that I'll look for is the barn move. What does the barn look like for a class drop? Is it a barn that routinely runs at claiming ranks, that maybe they had a horse spotted a little too aggressively and they're bringing it back down a little bit? There are a bunch of factors, and of course, these are hard set rule. But I think Mike, you definitely touched on a couple of some good answers there.
Yeah, one more that I can think of that it's especially at Del Mar, Saratoga, and toward the end of those meets plays well. Owners trying to win a training title or a owner crown, dropping horses into claiming races where they can win. You see, specifically, I can think of Klarovich has done it in the last couple of years. The big one at Oaklawn is M&M Racing, Mike Sisk. M&M Racing does that. There's the Kit and Joy horses.
Ramsey's.
Ramsey's did that for like 3 straight years where they would run horses in non-winners of 1, non-winners of 2 allowance, and then drop them down to 40K or 30K claiming right at the end of the meet because A, don't want to ship the horse out. They don't have to pay for those bills to actually van the horse wherever it's going. And B, they can win the trainer's title by dropping down in class. Yep. So that's another angle where you can see a lot of those horses that they tend to run very, very well because the idea is they need to be 100% geared up so that they're not wasting the win at the wrong time, and so that they're able to essentially send the horse off after emptying the tank versus sending the horse off where their next effort is going to be their best effort.
Coming up this week, we have some more action at Belmont Park. I didn't actually realize until I saw the tweet from Travis Stone, the announcer. Churchill Downs is done. I didn't realize Sunday was it for them.
Did the mandatory payout in the pick 6, and I didn't realize that until Saturday. I ended up not even playing it because I had so much other stuff going on. But yeah, they're done so, man.
Mike's week is crazy when he misses a pick 6 a mandatory payout at a major circuit track.
It's been nuts. I mean, I'm prepping for Samba Bombs tomorrow. This is the first Tuesday issue of Samba Bombs ever. Can you know why?
Are you going to Canterbury?
I am going to Gulfstream Park. It's a mandatory pick 6 payout at Gulfstream Park.
That's right. It's getting over 3.3 million or something, right?
It's crazy too. It's a Florida law. Well, they have to close the books on all gambling on June 30th because of I guess it's like the end of year for the tax purposes. So all pools have to be paid out. So there's a mandatory payout on a Tuesday at Gulfstream Park that's going to be huge. I mean, it's going to pay stacks. Well, it will have stacks bet into it. I'm not so sure it will pay stacks, but it'll have a lot of money bet into it. So we're gonna have some fun and do a little Tuesday bombs, and then it's first ever. Never had Tuesday bombs before, but the pools will definitely support it this time. So I'm excited to get it going.
Canterbury, their big state bred day is on Wednesday. That's where I was thinking. Well, and then next Wednesday is the Indiana Derby. So my first thought was Indiana Grand, and I was like, well, no, Canterbury's got their stuff going on. So I guess is one of the nice things about the pandemic is that it's truncated of the schedules. And so, we've got the Indiana Derby on on a Wednesday. We've got Gulfstream Park doing the mandatory payout on a Tuesday. That's because of the fiscal year end. But still, this is it's a good time to be alive and playing in horse racing.
Yeah, having a little fun, man. And Canterbury's 10% late pick 5 is going great for them. They've done those pools have been solid. The payouts have been incredible. Even if you have chalk coming home, you're still seeing 4-figure payouts almost every single night there. So definitely recommend playing Canterbury. They're I think mainly Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday now. And then I love that Indiana Grand thought out of the box and said, hey, we're going to run our biggest race on a Wednesday. Because I think that's a great idea to just move it over there and say, let's do this let's make sure that we get as much exposure as possible. Because if you tried to run against, Belmont on Saturday, look, you're an afterthought. I mean, it's not. I feel bad for the Ohio Derby this year because look, it was running on a date where the focus was on Churchill Downs and it was focused on Belmont, rightfully. So I think Indiana Grand's making a big move, and it's not like these tracks didn't see just how much money could get bet on a Tuesday and Wednesday when everyone's just launching in tickets at Fauner Park and Will Rogers Downs, and they're handling over $1 million. I mean, if you put a good card out there, the degenerates will show up, and I definitely am guilty of that one. So yeah, I'm looking for it. Looking forward to it.
You bring up a great point about the scheduling not running against the big tracks because Keeneland starts on July 10th. So July 11th, you have 6 grade 6 races. 3 of them are grade 1s. So you've got that to contend with. And then that's also what Del Mar will be back in action that weekend. So you'd have Del Mar to compete with. And this weekend is July 4th. So you're already up against it there. And Belmont has got 5 graded stakes, including the Met Mile, which is going to be a Breeders' Cup winning for the big ass Van Sturt Mile. So a lot of great horse racing action. Like Mike said, really wise of Indiana Grand to put the Indiana Derby on a Wednesday. This has been fun, Mike. I don't really have a great way to wrap this up. I'm so enamored with the fact that we're doing this live stream and that everything seems to be going so well. Do you have anything else that you're looking forward to? We're probably going to do Belmont, I'm guessing, for the late pick 4 show on Thursday.
Yeah, we'll talk through it. We got to figure out where we're going to go. I got to figure out where the bombs are this weekend too. They're probably going to be at Belmont. So we're trying to have the bombs and the Magic Mike pick 4 be different tracks. So we'll have to figure out how to work that out for this weekend, because I'm assuming I'll do Belmont for the bombs there. And then, yeah, I mean, I can't wait for Keeneland to go too. It's going to be fun to have a little cup of coffee with Keeneland here. A 5-day meet to just get to see some of very good horses. It's kind of like an Ascot feel, doesn't it? Like where everyone's kind of talking about just going there and getting 1 race or 2 in. I think it's going to be a good prep for some horses going to Saratoga afterward. So I think that Keeneland meet's going to be awesome. I'm pretty excited about seeing what they do with the Keeneland meet. So it'll be good. And yeah, this weekend, it was a frustrating one, man. It was a profitable weekend because the bombs hit on Friday, and so that paid for the weekend. But then it was, just these close calls after close calls, and just missing that one price that was the next horse in is not there. So hopefully we can come back and just crush again this next weekend.
The final word I'll say about the chalk that we had over the weekend, it wasn't a weekend to try and necessarily make a lot of money, make big scores. Last weekend was about seeing some of the biggest stars in their divisions. Midnight Beastie, the head of the Distaff division, Tom Zaytod in the older male handicap division, Newspaper of Record reasserting herself. So if you're lamenting the fact that it was chalky, or that if you played Mike and I's pick 4 tickets from the show last week, you hit the ticket but you didn't profit any money, you actually lost money. Appreciate the fact that as a fan of the game, you just got to see some unbelievable performances last weekend.
Well, and I went back and looked at my ticket afterward. I'm still pretty happy. I mean, we beat 1 favorite there. That thing pays. I mean, we've got the 11-1 in the last race. If you're able to get by, if let's say Bizu doesn't fire and that Serengeti Empress holds, or Tom Zaytod goes down, one of those 2 beat, and this thing pays. You also had the Ashton 2-year-old that paid. It was 2-5, 3-5 in the first race too. So we had chalk to chalk to chalk, and if we get through one of those, then it's crushing. If we could throw 2 of them, then that thing paid a lot of money. So you got to be able to spread against some of these favorites. Unfortunately, for the betting side of it, the favorites came home. Fortunately, for the racing stars side of it, it's fun to see those horses show up and do what they did and be so dominant. I mean, you don't remember when a 5-1 beats the favorite. You remember when, Beholder makes the move in the Pacific Classic. And that's, so seeing some of those horses make those type of moves is awesome as well.
Thank you so much to everybody who listened, who watched on the live stream. We're going to try and make this a regular thing. Our normal times to record are 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays. We'll, of course, let you know with advance notice if anything's going to change. But hopefully you're able to join us at some point if you weren't today, or you can come back and we'll have some more fun with this, and we'll answer some more of your questions as they come through. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I'm Magic.
And I'm Mike.
We'll see you next time.